Laura, you can go ahead. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Both of you know my name is Christy Reese. I am the chair of the assessment committee at Triton College. So I just wanted to take some time today to talk about general education assessment on campus and what it looks like, where you can find some of the information, and just answer any questions that you may have regarding general education assessment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process and some of that as we go to. Just in general, this is a assessment cycle that we show at just about anything related to assessment, because whether we're assessing a classroom outcome, a course, a program level outcome, or our general education outcomes, really the same cycle occurs when we evaluate the information and the data related to that. So for most of us, when it comes to classroom and course, we can relate to that program as well, but general education is kind of a overarching group of outcomes that partner with all of our other outcomes. So I'll talk about the definition of what that is, or overall definition, shortly. But when we look at assessment in general, there's really a continuous cycle that occurs, and it's identifying our desired outcomes. So we have 5 identified general education outcomes, and then from that point, taking that outcome, assessing it based on our set parameters, our set criteria and values for success, and then interpreting the information that we do gather from our different studies and evaluations. And I'll talk about the process again in a little bit. After we interpret that evidence, we plan based on that evidence. So we plan change, we plan adjustments, we plan for additional resources or for some form of change based on that evidence. And after we plan, then we implement that change. And essentially, our cycle continues and starts over. So it's a constant state of improvement, right? So a continuous effort to make sure that we are teaching what we say we're teaching, our students are getting, are producing those outcomes that we have set for them to produce, and evaluating the practices and what we can do to make them more effective. So that's really the assessment process in a nutshell, so very abbreviated. But let's focus just for today on general education learning outcomes. When we look at these, I'm going to read the definition verbatim. This is straight from our assessment committee handbook or glossary. So the terminology is important because we all want to make sure that we're speaking the same language. So the general education learning outcomes are achieved as a result of successful completion of the general education requirements for any degree program. The outcomes state that upon completion of the degree, the student should be able to effectively meet these 5 criteria. So that means that any student that comes to Triton College and attains a degree should have achieved these 5 areas of effectiveness. So the first one is critical thinking, and critical thinking was done in our evaluation last year. I'm going to share some of those results with you, or where to find them on our portal page, because our evaluation of critical thinking was done in 2020. And those details were shared, and also that last year, and then also shared again at Learning Improvement Week this week. So when we talk about critical thinking, it's the student's ability to explore issues, ideas, artifacts, and events before accepting or formulating an opinion or conclusion. So it's really them taking in the holistic picture and evaluating the entire issue and multiple perspectives, and exploring to find different areas of evidence and proof to back the opinion that they either have already formulated or they are attempting to formulate. So that's critical thinking in a nutshell. When we look at communication, communication is being evaluated this semester, specifically written communication, and then also next semester. So communication is the ability to develop and express ideas in written or oral form. So this year we're doing written communication, and then next semester this spring we're doing written communication, and then in the fall we're going to do oral communication, because although they're both forms of communication, evaluating them separately is pretty important so that we can really focus our efforts. So communication is our second category. Our third category is information literacy. So that is the ability to identify, locate, evaluate, and responsibly use and share information. So that's when they are able to conduct their research, they're able to look for resources, share those resources, identify where they're even located, right, and evaluate for credibility. There's a lot that goes into each one of these. This, again, is just kind of our umbrella. This will be evaluated next spring in 2022. The next category is quantitative, and that one is literacy related to how to analyze and solve quantitative problems from a wide array of contexts. Okay, and this one will be evaluated in 2023. When we look at global learning, that's our final category, and it's the ability to analyze and explore complex global challenges from diverse perspectives. So these are our 5 general education learning outcomes, and as a result, again, of anybody that completes a degree here, we're saying that Triton College graduates have the ability to effectively critically think, communicate. They have effective information literacy, quantitative literacy, and global learning skills. So that's really the overall 5 key categories that we relate to our general education outcomes. So what is the process of our evaluation? So when we look at general education outcomes, again, we have 5, so they're evaluated yearly, with the exception of our written is kind of spread out between 2 years. And we have selected outcomes on a schedule, and we use our maps that have been created with our curriculum to map out what courses say that they're teaching communication, what courses say that they're teaching critical thinking to a level of what we call mastered. And we use those to identify courses. Then what happens after that is those courses are sent to research, who randomly selects a representative sample of what on campus is occurring. So, you know, if there's 47% of English classes relate to or have that as, 47% of the courses that say that they are mapped to an outcome are English, then we want to make sure that our sample represents that as well. So very complicated process, but that's again kind of the short story. And what happens is we reach out to instructors, we ask them to present us with artifacts from their classroom that represent examples of written or communication, critical thinking, or any of these general education outcomes. And our general education outcomes subcommittee evaluates them. So actually, prior to this meeting, that's where I was for about an hour and a half, and we're going to have another session. We sat as a subcommittee and looked at we only looked at 1 artifact. We do have 209 to evaluate this year. And how we go about evaluating is we use what's called the AAC and U value rubrics, which give us guidance as to how to score these different areas of general education outcomes. And we meet, we have conversations about the rubric that we use. We have what we call a norming session, which allows us to be able to reach a common way of evaluating, because I may grade differently, or not grade, it's not grading, I may rate differently than someone else rates. So it allows us the opportunity to get on the same page and to provide a broad spectrum of input into our evaluation. And from that point, after we evaluate those 209 artifacts this year, we will take that data from those rubrics and find areas of strength and weakness across campus and see what we can do to fill those areas of weakness, to make changes in our process and changes in the way that we allocate resources in many cases to improve teaching and learning. So that's what we call closing the loop. Once we share that data, we're hoping and our intention is that there will be plans and adjustments made accordingly. They will be implemented, and then they will lead to an adjustment. So that's the big picture as far as general education outcomes go, what the 5 of them are, how they are evaluated. I just wanted to give a chance for questions, if you have any questions, before I move on, and I'll show you the portal page, which has some great resources related to our general education outcomes. No questions?
Yeah, Chrissy, the general education, those are usually done as a committee. So, and then, because I have general education outcomes posted on my syllabus, and then after that, I have the specific SLOs after that for that specific class. So,
Right.
you do these as a committee? I don't know. I remember people doing it as a committee. They would sit there and it would be like, "What do you think we should change this word in this sentence and put this word instead of that word?" I remember doing something like that as a committee one time.
Yes. So for that, when we have the gen ed outcomes, they are on every syllabus, because every course or program, regardless of what you take here, should have some connection to one of our general education outcomes. And those were mapped out a few years back. And that's where all of those assignments kind of came, as to this course has, written communication. Not every course has all 5, and that's okay, because not every course really is appropriate. So it's very, when we go to the course level connection to our gen ed, it's very specific to that course or that program. But the final overall culmination, when it comes to a degree, should have all 5 of those levels. When it comes to evaluation and those decisions, that's kind of what I was talking about with the norming sessions and that general education outcomes subcommittee. We're the ones that take all of the artifacts, so the submissions from instructors of their student work, and we sit there and we talk about, the rubrics that are used to evaluate these students, our language, what does it mean for us as, someone in social science, or someone that's in math, or someone that's in health careers like me. We may have a different perspective as to what quantifies a 1, 2, 3, or 4 on a rubric. So that's the time for us to have those conversations and kind of level the playing field, if you will.
So you did this for the HLC? Before the HLC, you had a...
They did it last year, and then we just did it today. So we did our second ever for Triton College general education outcome evaluation today. We did just our norming session. We'll finish it this week, though.
And the HLC requires this, right?
It does help prove, yes, it does help prove our process and our assessment efforts, that they're truly occurring. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No problem. All right. So Kevin, you asked some great questions. For the AAC and U, it is the American, I know I'm going to get this wrong, Association of American Colleges and Universities. So they kind of set these different value rubrics for the different you got it. Yep, you got that right, for the website. So they set all of these different guidance tools for us to use in evaluating all of these different outcomes. And the rubrics are great. They're very, very detailed. They're very, very thorough. And we use them as a starting point for our evaluation. Now we kind of break them down to a little bit more simplistic terms so that they're a little more digestible, if you will. And we add our own column, which helps as well. So we make them we use them as our base and our foundation, and we tweak them a little bit to our needs. So when it comes to what classes were chosen for quantitative literacy, we haven't done that yet. That is a few years out for us to evaluate. But what we use is the maps that were created by faculty in the specific areas to identify which ones say that they, use quantitative literacy. And if you think about it, a lot of math courses are going to fit in that area, right? So we're, but also other areas, physics or certain sciences. But across campus, there's typically some level of association. It's all about the way that faculty has mapped out what they use. And I can tell you for written communication, a lot of our classes that had written communication were rhetoric, right? Rhetoric 101, Rhetoric 102, those are those heavier writing courses. But also we still were able to find connections in automotive, in health careers, and ophthalmology. I'm trying to think of some of the humanities courses that I know a history course that had some writing that it had linked in there as well. So we try to find representations across campus so that we can be a little more inclusive with that different evaluation and really seeing not just one silo of information, if you will, or very overly microscoped area, and be a little bit more inclusive to everybody. All right. It is an amazing process, and Jim, and I'm sure Kevin could take part too. Anybody is more than welcome to partake in the process. Now we've already started, but next year, if you're interested and this sounds like something you would like to do, definitely consider it. And if you're an assessment fellow still, sign up for that committee, subcommittee. We love as much participation as possible. Like I said, we have 209, which means 418 reads to do this week between 16 faculty. So it's a heavy load. Our target was 300, which would be 600 reads, but didn't quite make it this year. But it gets better every time we do it. So it's a worthwhile process to get involved in. All right, I'm going to stop sharing this. And I'm going to start showing just the portal page, because that's one page that I feel like, even though it's there and I reference it all the time, not everybody knows how to navigate or can find the information that they need on the page. So I'm going to go ahead and share that out. Fingers crossed it shares appropriately. All right, let me just log in here. I thought I was already logged in. All right, so when you go into the portal page, it's not sharing the right page, so let me share a different one, sorry. Just a second. All right, so hopefully it will share out for you the correct way. All right, there we go. So you should be able to see now the assessment committee page, and you can see just our broad overview of our mission and our goals, as well as the committee membership here, our meeting dates, the link to our meetings. Please join. We love company and we love involvement. And then a list of our subcommittees as well. So this is just kind of an overview of that page, so you can get an idea of different ways that if you wanted to get involved, you could. But with the purpose of today really being about our general education, I wanted to at least show you that on our page we do have some documents related to our general education outcomes assessment. So you'll see there that it says general education outcome assessment critical thinking 2019-2020. And if I click on that, it probably won't show to you, so I will pull it up again. Oh, it did. You never know when Collaborate's going to work the way you want it to. But this is very, very detailed. This is the evaluation that happened. So again, this is the process that occurred in fall of 2019 and spring of 2020. We're on a little bit different schedule this year thanks to COVID, but overall view of the process. So the committee was formed in October. In October, they approved the AAC you value rubrics. And actually, if you were to click on here, you would be able to see the rubric that they approved. This year we did the same thing. They did their random course sampling, and then they obtained their artifacts, did norming and evaluation in March. So we're a little bit off the typical schedule here. But you do see the representative courses that were evaluated for critical thinking last round. And from this, again, we pull all the data, all the information related to where our student representations fell on the scaling. I do want to make sure that it's important that everybody knows that this is not a grading of our student work. It's simply an evaluation of where they fall on a rubric of evaluation. So it's not that we're assigning an A, B, or C to student work that's submitted. We are not evaluating the instructor's ability to do so. We're just looking globally at the entire campus. You know, how did we do overall? So I do feel that it's extremely important that we mention that and point that out. So this is, again, in the 5 key areas that were related to critical thinking is how it was evaluated. And this is where our students fell on the assessment results. So based on the grading, and I keep saying grading and someday I will stop. Based on the rating and scoring of the general education outcome subcommittee members and those evaluators, we came up with students having a kind of a weakness in the areas of influence and context, influence of context and assumptions, student position, conclusions, and related outcomes. So it's kind of our area where we saw that we needed to have improvement. So from there, again, we share the rubric and the way that we abbreviated it. Key takeaways are on here as well. I'm not going to go through each one. And then, you know, a little bit more about the data, where to find more information. Now, for this specifically, this led to conversations on campus. Learning Improvement Week of 2020 was a lot about the results and discussion related to our findings for critical thinking. This was revitalized at last week's Learning Improvement Week. So we've had conversations about across campus, and I invite you, absolutely, please look at these results. Look at areas where you can find connections to try and better serve our students in those areas related to critical thinking. So seeing these results helps us to get a perspective as to how we can change things in the classroom in our teaching and learning to improve the level. Now, again, that's somewhat an abbreviated version of the actual results, but those are present there for you to look at, again, under the General Education Assessment Critical Thinking 2019 to 2020. And after our evaluation of written, those will be under here as well. So that's a good source of finding the documents. Also, if you want to just see what are our general education outcomes, they're listed here. This is verbatim for what I had on my slide, but these are, again, our overarching outcomes for every student that comes through the college. And as far as other things that on this page, there's the glossary, because our terminology is extremely important across campus. So there's a glossary present. There's also a handbook for assessment. So these are just different tools that in general would help with any form of evaluation. And other than that, I think those are the key things that I wanted to touch on and at least kind of navigate you around the shell so you could get an idea of where our general education information is housed, how to find out more information, and now you know about how you could participate. I will point out also on our subcommittee page, we do have that subcommittee that you were talking about, James, that is related to that. It's responsible for all activities pertaining to the administration of general education assessment, including preparation of faculty instruction, surveys, and tools to communicate about that data collection process and findings and recommendations. And that is chaired by Maxie Armis, Derek Salinas, Lazarski, and myself. So we kind of lead the effort, but we do lean on, a lot of times the assessment fellows are the ones that partake in this process. So that's why there's a big group of us that work together to get the work done.
Okay.
All right. All right. Do you have any questions for me? That's really all I had. I wanted to give the opportunity to just go over the broad scope of things and then show you where to find things on the portal and answer any questions that you might have. All right. No questions?
Okay. Yeah. No.
No. All right. Well,
All right. Thank you.
yep, no problem. I can absolutely